forgot that part for a second.
My name is Andrew, and I'm a grateful recovering addict. Clean date is 9/25/15. My home group is Hell and Back. Who is an addict? Most of us do not have to think twice about this question. We know. Our whole life and thinking was centered around drugs in one form or another. The getting and using and finding ways and means to get more. We lived to use and used to live. Very simply, an addict is a man or woman whose life is controlled by drugs. We are people in the grip of a controlling and progressive illness whose ends are always the same: jails, institutions, and death.
What is the NA program?
My name is Tyler Manetic. What is the Narcotics Anonymous program? NA is a nonprofit fellowship or society of men and women for whom drugs have become a major problem. We are recovering addicts who meet regularly to help each other stay clean. This is a program of complete abstinence from all drugs. There is only one requirement for membership: the desire to stop using. We suggest that you keep an open mind and give yourself a break. Our program is a set of principles written so simply that we can follow them in our daily lives. The most important thing about them is that they work. There are no strings attached to NA. We are not affiliated with any organizations. We have no initiation fees or dues, no pledges to sign, no promises to make to anyone. We are not connected with any political, religious, or law enforcement groups, and are under no surveillance at any time. Anyone may join us regardless of age, race, sexual identity, creed, religion, or lack of religion. We're not interested in what or how much you used or who your connections were, what you have done in the past, how much or how little you have, but only in what you want to do about your problem and how we can help. The newcomer is the most important person in any meeting because we can only keep what we have by giving it away. We have learned from our group experience that those who keep coming to our meetings regularly stay clean.
Why are we here?
I'm Race, and I'm an addict. Before coming to the fellowship of NA, we could not manage our own lives. We could not live and enjoy life as other people do. We had to have something different, and we thought we had found it in drugs. We placed their use ahead of the welfare of our families, our wives, husbands, and our children. We had to have drugs at all costs. We did many people great harm, but most of all, we harmed ourselves. Through our inability to accept personal responsibilities, we were actually creating our own problems. We seemed to be incapable of facing life on its own terms. Most of us realized that in our addiction we were slowly committing suicide, but addiction is such a cunning enemy of life that we had lost the power to do anything about it. Many of us ended up in jail or sought help through medicine, religion, and psychiatry. None of these methods was sufficient for us. Our disease always resurfaced or continued to progress until in desperation we sought help from each other in Narcotics Anonymous. After coming to NA, we realized we were sick people. We suffered from a disease from which there is no known cure. It can, however, be arrested at some point, and recovery is then possible.
How it works?
I'm JD, I'm an addict. If you want what we have to offer or are willing to make the effort to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. These are the principles that make our recovery possible. 1, we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction and that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, we came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. 7, we humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, we continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry the message to addicts and practice these principles in all our affairs. This sounds like a big order. We can't do it all at once. We didn't become addicted in one day, so remember, easy does it. There there is one thing more than anything else that will defeat us in our recovery. That is an attitude of indifference or intolerance towards spiritual principles. 3 of these that are indispensable are honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. With these, we are well on our way. We feel that our approach to the disease of addiction is completely realistic, where the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. We feel that our way is practical, for one addict can best understand and help another addict. We believe the sooner we face our problems within our society and everyday living, just that much faster do we become acceptable, responsible, and productive members of that society. The only way to keep from returning to active addiction is to not take that first drug. If you're like us, you know that 1 is too many and 1,000 never enough. We put great emphasis on this, for we know that when we use drugs in any form or substitute one for another, we release our addiction all over again. Thinking of alcohol as different from other drugs has caused a great many of addicts to relapse. Before we came to NA, many of us viewed alcohol separately, but we cannot afford to be confused about this. Alcohol is a drug. We are people with the disease of addiction who must abstain from all drugs in order to recover.
The 12 traditions?
My name is Eric. I'm an addict. The 12 traditions. We keep what we have only with vigilance, and just as freedom for the individual comes from the 12 steps, so freedom for our group springs from our traditions. As long as the ties that bind us together are stronger than those that would tear us apart, all will be well. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends on NA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there's one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop using. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or NA as a whole. 5, each group has one primary purpose, to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. 6, an NA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the NA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, or prestige diverge from our primary purpose. 7, every NA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Narcotics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, NA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Narcotics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the NA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Understanding these traditions comes slowly over a period of time. We pick up information as we talk to members and visit various groups. It usually isn't until we get involved with service that someone points out that personal recovery depends on NA unity, and that unity depends on how well we follow our traditions. The 12 traditions of NA are not negotiable. They are the guidelines that keep our fellowship alive and free. By following these guidelines in our dealings with others and society at large, we avoid many problems. That is not to say that our traditions eliminate all problems. We still have to face difficulties as they arise: communication problems, differences of opinion, internal controversies, and troubles with individuals and groups outside the fellowship. However, when we apply these principles, we avoid some of the pitfalls. Many of our problems are like those that our predecessors had to face. Their hard-won experience gave birth to the traditions, and our own experience has shown that these principles are just as valid today as they were when these traditions were formulated. The 12 traditions protect us from the internal and external forces that could destroy us. They are truly the ties that bind us together. It is only through understanding and application that they work.
We do recover?
I'm Dave, and I'm an addict. We do recover when at the end of the road we find that we can no longer function as a human being, either with or without drugs. We all face the same dilemma. What is there left to do? There seems to be this alternative: either go on the best we can to the bitter end, jails, institutions, or death, or find a new way to live. In years gone by, very few addicts ever had this last choice. Those who are addicted today are more fortunate. For the first time in man's entire history, a simple way has been proving itself in the lives of many addicts. It is available to us all. The simple, spiritual, not religious program known as Narcotics Anonymous.
It's my honor and a privilege this time to introduce our Friday night main speaker, which is Jesse.
Yeah. Hey up there. Hi guys. My name's Jesse and I'm an addict. Wow. I'm grateful to be in a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. Grateful to be a participant in my life. And I'm hot. So, I want to start off and I want to ask you guys something. Told you you'd mess with me, Drew. Anyways, would anybody with 5 years or more please raise your hand? Wow. So first off, I'd like to thank my predecessors for coming before me and lighting the way and allowing me the privilege to be able to participate in my life today. Would anybody with 1 to 5 years please raise your hand? Congratulations, we're the lineage. It is our responsibility to keep the fluency between the old-timers and the newcomers, and to also stay participants in our lives. Anybody with less than a year clean, please raise your hand. Welcome to Narcotics Anonymous. This is the best show on earth, man. I'm nervous, and I want to let you guys see that. I want my voice to crack. I want my posture to be a little bit off. I want to be all over the place, because I want you guys to see that I'm human just like you, right? Our 8th tradition talks about how Narcotics Anonymous is non-professional, and I believe that. I'm not a professional speaker. I'm not a guy who has a shotgun share. I'm just a guy telling you the truth. So please, and thank you for allowing me to share the truth with you. My story, I'm going to get into a little bit of religion. I'm going to get into a little bit of different stuff because it has to do with my upbringing. Disclaimer, Narcotics Anonymous is not affiliated with any religion, any outside organization, but this is part of my story, and in order to get the context of who I am as a human, I have to explain a little bit of this. So I grew up in suburbia, right? It's in this place called Camas, Washington, if you guys haven't heard of it. Yes. Well, it's like a suburb of Portland. Like, it's horrible, right? So it's just this little place. I lived on top of a hill in kind of Yippieville. And I lived there for about 18 years. So my mother was a counselor, so she was really good at asking me how I felt and what's going on with me and talking me through these processes that meant absolutely nothing. And my father was a preacher. So I grew up with pastor dad and counselor mom. So basically I learned how to talk, right? That's what I learned from those two. I learned how to talk. They treated me very well. They loved me. They gave me everything that I needed. I was very blessed in the circumstances that I had. So growing up in this church, I had this, I'm going to call it a label, that I was a pastor's kid. I had this concept that I had to live up to being something I'm not, right? They had this idea that I was supposed to be this prim and proper individual, and I was supposed to always, I wasn't supposed to swear or fight or do any of these things that I'd like to do. I was a little bit rough around the edges. The other kids in the church would consistently dime me out for anything that went wrong because they knew I was a little bit squirmy. So I had kids like literally bite their arms, go up to their mom and say, "Jesse did it." So I felt alienated, right? From the very beginning, from when I was young, man, I was like 7 years old when this stuff started happening. And not saying I wasn't a participant, but this was my experience, right? It's through all that, like I felt alienated and like I wasn't a part of. So I go into grade school, I go into elementary school, man. And I got a few weird physical things, right? Like I got my pinky cut off when I was 1. I have really dry hands. So like going into grade school, everybody made fun of my hands, right? Like he's got old man hands, don't touch him, right? He's got cooties, whatever it was. So again, this alienation that I experienced from the church and this alienation that I experienced in grade school was bred into me, right, growing up. So I started saying things to myself like, I'm not good enough, I'm not like those kids, I'm weird, I'm all these things, and I started reinforcing to myself the kind of guy I was. So growing up, I had these group of friends, and these kids were kind of, I'm going to call them nerds, but I don't want to label them, but they were nerds, and we were the types of kids who would take our computers over to our friends and play World of Warcraft and hang out and eat Mountain Dew and popcorn and stuff like that. So I became really close with a lot of these guys, and I started smoking cigarettes, right? I started chief in the chimney, right? And they didn't like this very much. And so one summer, after they found this out, they just stopped talking to me, completely stopped talking to me. And I found myself with no friends, nobody around, right? I had nobody there for me, nobody to call my friend, nobody to talk with or share, and that was the loneliest summer of my life, right? So freshman year, right? I'm lonely, I have no friends, and I fall into this crowd of older kids. And these older kids, they happen to like narcotics, right? And so of course, I want to be liked. I'm alienated, I'm not worth it. And these guys are kind of like pulling me in a little bit, saying, hey, if you hang out with us and you do the things we do, like you're a part of our little crew. And I'm like, all right. So I start hanging out with these guys, and I start getting into narcotics, man. And from this point on, a lot of us knows what happens, right? It progresses, right? It gets worse. I continue to try and fill this void of emptiness and this void of not being worthy with narcotics. And so I progress down this road. I get into different drugs. I do different things. I start doing crime, committing crime. I get this concept that I'm a hippie at one point. So I get a peace sign tattooed on my hand. Now I'm a hippie. And then a little bit down the road, right, I start to color coordinate. So I think I'm a gangster now, from Camas, mind you. And I continue progressing down this way. And so all this time, I'm stealing identities, right? I'm taking a little bit of you and a little bit of you to try and make myself feel like I'm somebody whole. And I did this for a really long time. So the rubber hits the road, man. I have a bad experience with narcotics. I end up in the hospital. And, you know, my mother, she said to me, she said, Jesse, you know, I prayed that my higher power would take your life. Like, if you're going to live a life of drugs, right? And for a mom to pray that, like, I don't know what that's like, but it hit me pretty hard, right? My mom just prayed for me to die, right? If I'm going to continue down this road of misery. So what'd I do? I didn't get clean. That's what I didn't do. I didn't get clean because I'm an addict. And once I start, I don't know how to stop. So I continued to use because I wasn't at that point where I wanted to get clean. So I go to, I try and do this geographical change, and I go to Spokane, right, or Spokompton, whatever you want to call it, and I go to Eastern Washington, and I spend some time out there, and I get this concept of, you know, gangster from Camas, right? It's just initiated there a little bit more because now I'm from Spokangeles or whatever it is, and so I take some more identities, and I come back to Camas. Something's got to give, right? I start getting more trouble. I get arrested. I go to juvie. I opt into this treatment program. I go to this program back in Spokane. In this program, I was exposed to Narcotics Anonymous, right? Out of the most important thing I got from that facility was that exposure, right? They took us to meetings. I was 16 years old, right? So I went to Narcotics Anonymous, and I can't tell you anything from my first meeting, not one lick. I was not focused. I was completely out there, a little bit insane, all of that. But I remember sharing, and I remember that I liked, you know, people listening to me. That was kind of cool. But I didn't pay much attention to it. So I ended up opting into this long-term, it's like a halfway house for juveniles. I thought it was really cool because they allowed us to smoke and we're underage. So I wanted to go there for a little bit longer. So I ended up in Mount Vernon, Washington. In Mount Vernon, like I had my first experience with other recovering addicts, like people who are clean and wanting to better their life. And I had a lot of fun up there. So I went to meetings out there. I moved into a recovery house. I thought I was doing everything right. I was going to meetings, and I was kind of working steps, and I was participating in the program and everything they asked me to do. And then I met a girl. She was cute, right? She was really cute. And out there in Mount Vernon, nobody explained to me why we go to one fellowship. Nobody explained to me why to pick a fellowship and stick with it, right? So I was involved with other meetings, and I went to this meeting at 11:30 at night, and then it was candlelit, and this girl was there that I thought was really cute, and she was loaded, right? And so me being the good guy I am, right, I was like, hey, let me take you to the store and I'll buy you some food because you just got kicked out of your recovery house for getting loaded. Let me help you out, right? I'll buy you a pizza or something. So we go to the store, and after sitting there for a minute and kind of watching her do that little, she's doing a little sideways thing, I'm like, you holding? What do you got? What do you got on you? And she's like, yeah, I got a ½ ounce or whatever. So I was like, hey, let's go back to my recovery house and we're cool. I'll be all right. We'll just do that. So for the next week, I got loaded and I had sexual relations with this girl, right? And it was fun, right? I thought it was fun. So then, after this week of debauchery happened, I had this realization. I'm now lying to everybody around me. All these people I thought that I made my friends, I'm bold-faced lying to them about what I'm doing. I cannot continue to get away with this in a recovery house. Meetings suck because I can't share about anything because they'll think I'm full of it. So I got to do something different. So I went home, man. And when I came back to Camas, I continued to get loaded for the next year and a half. So at this point in my story, it just gets worse. It continues to get worse. And there's no, we all understand it, right? We know what happens when we put drugs in our body. And this is the first time, by the way, of me sharing that I've gone into my past like that. I don't normally do that. It's not because I don't want to show you, but it's because I really believe in the message of Narcotics Anonymous. But I had this realization last time I spoke that it's important for you guys to see where I came from. So with all that, I used, with this good upbringing, I used with financially solvent home, I used with people around me. It didn't matter what, I just continued to use, and I used because I didn't like who I was, right? So with that said, I'm loaded and I'm keeping a journal. I have this journal I wrote when I was loaded for whatever reason. I thought I was artistic or whatever it was. And I couldn't rob anybody anymore because I had robbed all my friends, and I couldn't keep doing that. The cops knew who I was. They knew I was selling drugs. I couldn't do that anymore. I had this little scheme going on with my family to get money out of them, which was ironic. Because of my experience in Mount Vernon with meetings, I knew a little bit about the steps, right? So I used the 9th step as an excuse, right? I said, hey, Mom, I owe a lot of people money, and they're after me. They're going to take me out. And as part of my 9th step, in order for me to get better, I got to pay all these people off. So how much do you owe, Jesse? What do you owe? And I gave her this outrageous number. And so I continued to get my money from her that way for a while because I didn't want to sell drugs and I couldn't rob people anymore. So I capitalized on my mom. And that feeling for me, that's shameful for me to talk about. Not only did I just totally use Narcotics Anonymous to my advantage in that way, but I really pulled on my mom's heartstrings. I took everything that was good in her, and I exploited that, because that's what I do in my addiction. So I have this journal, and I've kept this notes, all these notes about what my experience has been like with the use of drugs. So I can't openly tell my mom I'm using because of the shame behind it, right? Of everything I was doing to get loaded, I couldn't bring it to her. So instead, I gave her this journal. And I gave her this journal. I said, read this. This will explain everything. And she did, man. She called me and said, are you fucking loaded? And I said, yes, Mom, I'm loaded. And she said, well, what are you going to do about it? I was like, well, I guess I should probably get clean. So I began this process of getting into detox and all these things that we do. So what I can tell you is I went to detox and I went to inpatient treatment and I did these things to try and solve my problem, and none of it worked, right? I'd leave 10 hours into detox. I'd take off from treatment because they wouldn't let me smoke, whatever it was, whatever excuse I had to keep using it, I kept using it. So I go into inpatient, I leave inpatient, and I go home and I try and fall out, right? Because I get my bag after I leave treatment, I go home and I can't keep living high, and I can't keep doing this. So I try and OD, right? And I fall out. And I wake back up. So I was like, well, that's not how that's supposed to work, right? Like I put enough in, like I knew what I was trying to do, why didn't it work? So 6 days later, I tried again, and I wake back up, man. So I got this thing in my head that says, man, I can't live high, and I can't die, so what's my option? Well, it's to get clean. Well, how do I do that? Well, maybe meetings could do it. Maybe meetings of Narcotics Anonymous could help me stay clean. So I started going back to meetings. I was still getting loaded at the time, man. And if you're loaded in this room, like, welcome to Narcotics Anonymous. I'm so fucking glad you're here. Like, because of me coming to meetings loaded, like, I was able to hear something that saved my life. So I kept going to meetings loaded, and as I was loaded, I heard this gentleman. He spoke about validation. He spoke about the fact that no matter what he did, he always needed something from somebody. He just wanted to be liked. He just wanted to be loved. He just wanted to be a part of. And he has that today. And like I told you guys before, I've been alienated my whole life. Like, what attracted me wasn't he stopped using drugs. It was him talking about validation. Our diversity is our strength here in Narcotics Anonymous, right? So my last day using was February 10th, 2011, or 2013, excuse me, February 11, 2013. And after I had fallen out, the next morning I had one hit left, and I did that drug, and I went to church, right? See my dad preach.